If you go down to the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise. Whether in the Old World or Age of Sigmar, dryads are an iconic Warhammer model. Fortunately, they're also really easy to paint, and let you try out loads of fun wood effects. In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint up a Branchwraith in a classic woodland scheme, but the same techniques are applicable across any Wood Elf model or even Ents for Middle-earth. So, without further ado, let's get started. I've assembled the model and prepared it by base coating it with Wraithbone. I'm going to begin most of the areas with contrast paints, and so Wraithbone gives a good pale base colour to work from, and being a creamy off-white, it has a warm tone to it that pure white doesn't have, which will work better with the contrast paints I'm going to use. I like to work from the innermost areas outwards when painting a model, to minimise the risk of overspilling, and so I'm going to begin with the torso. Inspired by real trees, I'm going to paint this area like sapwood, which is usually much paler than the outer bark. So, I'm going to begin by applying a layer of Seraphim Sepia. Just apply this evenly all over the wood skin, soaking up anywhere it's pooling too heavily. Also paint this over the hair. With that dry, we have a great base colour to work from. I'm next going to take Skeleton Horde contrast paint, diluted slightly with some medium, and apply that into any of the deeper recesses where I want the shade to be a little stronger. The cheeks, for example, the eye sockets, the hairline, neck, and under the breasts. I also want a little bit of a gradient where the sapwood gets darker towards the bottom of the model, and so I'm also going to apply this to the lower legs, covering about half the area. Finally, I'm going to dilute Snakebite Leather contrast with equal parts medium, and apply this to about the bottom quarter of the legs, leaving some of the last two colours showing as a gradient. I'm also going to apply this into the eye sockets, the knot-like tattoos, and the mouth, to emphasise those even more. And now the sapwood skin is all shaded, I'm going to begin highlighting it with Pallid Wych Flesh. Here I'm going to pick out the raised areas, and on areas like the legs, apply the highlights as vertical stripes, to emphasise the wood grain detail on the model. Finally, I'm going to spot highlight the most prominent points with white scar, to emphasise the face and knots a little more. And with that, the inner bark is complete. You'll notice I haven't painted the hair yet. I'll return to that later. I'm now going to turn attention to the outer bark. I'm going to begin quickly by going over anywhere that I overspilled onto more egregiously in the previous stages, rebasing those areas with Wraithbone. Depending on how careful you were with the previous step, you may have more or less to do here. Just go around, cleaning everything up ready for painting. With the area prepared, we're going to paint all of the outer bark in the same way, beginning with a coat of Wyldwood. Now, following the normal rules for contrast paints here, focus on one area at a time and paint that fully before moving on to the next, trying not to disturb the paint you've just laid down. I would recommend that when you get to these areas up here, close to the inner bark, switch to a smaller brush because the last thing you want to do is spill over what you've just lovingly painted. So work your way around, applying this over all the outstanding bark areas. You can of course apply a second layer if you think the first isn't strong enough. I'll see you when all of that's done. With that done, we can now see where we're at, that lovely contrast between the two barks, and we can start highlighting it up. I'll show you on this bit of the arm, but the same techniques will be used across the outer bark. To start, I'm layering back over with Steel Legion Drab, leaving the recesses shaded, but otherwise covering back over most of the bark. This is a very thick highlight, more primarily re-establishing some colour. You can of course dry brush this instead as well. I just like the greater control that painting it by hand gives, even if it takes longer. You can see how that first layer has started to bring out the lovely wood grain detail and the gnarled shapes. I'm next going to take Karak Stone and apply some slightly narrower, more targeted highlights, following the same approach, but by being slightly thinner, leaving some of the previous Steel Legion Drab visible. We're going to go around everything, painting it in exactly the same way and refining the detail even further. It takes a while, but this step is really worth it. Then, with a 1-to-1 mix of Karak Stone and Wraithbone, I'm going to apply some very targeted highlights on the most prominent bumps and gnarls, anywhere I want to particularly draw the eye. And finally, with pure Wraithbone, I'm going to spot highlight the very tips and edges of the bark to pick out the most prominent points. That final highlight really just brings everything together. And with this done, the majority of the model is complete. The next thing I want to do is focus on the hair and give it a bit of a tint. I've diluted Militarum Green with about 2 parts contrast medium, and I'm applying this thinly all over the hair. It's more of a glaze than anything and gives a leafy green tint. When that's dry, I'm going to highlight the hair, first with a 1-to-1 mix of Ogryn Camo and Dorn Yellow. You can use the side of the brush to more easily pick out the strands. And then a very sparing spot highlight with pure Dorn Yellow on the most extreme points. With that done, I can turn my attention to the final details. What I want to create is a contrast between dead wood at the bottom of the model and more living wood at the top, where you can see some leaves. To begin with, I'm going to paint any leaves I can see with Wraithbone, prepare them for the next steps. I'm now going to take a 1-to-1 mix of Militarum Green and Plaguebearer Flesh, and paint this over any branches where there are leaves, covering both the leaves themselves and some of the wood, like so. This will tint those areas green and give the impression of still living wood. I'm then going to paint the leaves with a layer of Mantis Warrior's Green to make them even more vibrant. Then, I'm going to highlight them with Ogryn Camo and pick out the edges of the leaves. I'm also going to use this to re-establish highlights on the branches where I shaded them green. Before finally spot highlighting the leaves with Dorn Yellow. The final thing to paint now are the sprites. I'm going to pick them out with Corax White to help them stand out from the warmer tones of the Branchwraith herself. There are two on this model, one here and one here, and their limbs are kind of entwined with the branches. Both sprites are going to get a layer of Kroxigor Scales. When that's dry, I'm going to highlight them first with Temple Guard Blue, picking out the limbs and brightening the skin. Then, a 1-to-1 mix of Temple Guard Blue and Blue Horror, more selectively emphasising the limbs and face. And finally, a spot highlight of Blue Horror. And there we are, the finished Branchwraith. All that's left now is to base the model. I'm going for a forest scheme, so to begin with I'm going to cover the base with Greenstuff World's dark brown mud, but you can use Stirland mud as an alternative. Just apply it thickly, getting it into the nooks and crannies, but being careful not to get it on the model itself. Whilst that's still wet, I've got a few small twigs that I've foraged, and I'm just going to embed these into the base to suggest forest litter and really enhance the woodland feeling of the base. As the texture paint dries, it will hold them in place like glue. Once everything's dry, I'm going to paint the twigs quickly with Wyldwood. I've given the paint an hour or so to dry and base coated the twigs, and we're now ready to shade everything with a thick layer of Athonian Camoshade. This will tint the ground green and give the appearance of a mossy forest floor. When that's dry, I'm going to start dry brushing, firstly with Steel Legion Drab, and then a lighter dry brush with Balor Brown, and finally a very gentle dry brush of Wraithbone. As an optional extra touch to bring back that green tone, you can randomly dry brush a few patches with Elysian Green, creating some variation and the impression of moss. The next thing to do is stick on any tufts or static grass. You can even stick some into the branches at the base of the model. The very final thing I'm going to do is dab some PVA randomly, and then stick on some model leaves that I have using a pair of tweezers. This will act as autumnal leaf litter. All there is left to do now is paint the rim of your base your chosen colour, and we're done. And there we are, the finished Branchwraith. I hope you enjoyed this video. I have plenty more painting videos on my channel, so do please check them out or leave me a comment below if there's something in particular you'd like to see me paint next. Please do like and subscribe if you like this video, it really helps the channel grow. Otherwise I'll see you next time, and until then, happy painting.